Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. Okay, today we have John Crickett, engineering leader, prolific content creator, and the man behind the popular Coding Challenges newsletter. Really happy to have you here today. We're going to chat about how John juggles being an engineering leader, having a massive online presence, why he started Coding Challenges, and what he'd be learning and how he'd be learning it. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Brian. It's great to be here talking to you. Great to finally meet as well.
Yeah, I've been following you on LinkedIn, probably like a lot of people here. You're at like, 100,000 followers on LinkedIn right now?
Something like that, yeah.
And you're like all over the place. You're an engineering leader. You have 100,000 followers on LinkedIn. You also have an incredibly popular newsletter, Coding Challenges.
Yeah, it's getting there. Coding Challenges is growing fast. There's about 100,000 subscribers between LinkedIn and Substack.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing. I love those challenges. I think that if you're not checking them out, by the way, you should totally check them out. It's a great way to do some hands-on learning, build something beyond your typical like to-do app, or do those kind of Udemy, watch and type tutorials for sure.
Yeah, it's very much about learning by building. So, create a real project, build something, or clone a little bit of software to learn by doing that, and really dig into understanding how it works. Do a bit more than a traditional to-do app or another tic-tac-toe game.
It's funny, I did a very simple tic-tac-toe tutorial on YouTube, but yeah, like I've seen a ton of those, and I'm like, yeah, these are great for really beginners, but you don't want to build more complex stuff eventually and understand like how do things work under the hood.
Yeah, and also I really enjoyed myself adding some of the ones that people don't know, like how do you build something like grep? How do you build a diff? Those things that a lot of people don't do, they're not getting down into that level. And the same for the network ones. A lot of people use DNS every day, but they're not consciously aware of it. They don't understand how it works. They don't understand what it actually means to send a UDP packet somewhere, what that looks like. So those are really good ones, the DNS servers. I just done one that's going up tomorrow about port scanners. And most people probably have no idea what that means to scan a port, what a port scanner does, how they're used, or how to go about building one, or the issues you need to think about. So that gets you very low level in understanding TCP.
And if you want to do something like Rust, for example, these are probably great exercises to use like a more lower level programming language like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how Coding Challenges came about. In fact, I was learning Rust. December 22, I started looking to learn Rust. Was going through some projects I've done, started lighting up a few of them, and then I was kicking out some ideas, and eventually in March, we had a conversation with somebody. I thought I should start sharing these. I'll try putting them on a newsletter. And I had what seemed at the time ambitious goal of getting 1,000 subscribers by the end of 23. And I had 1,000 subscribers within 24 hours or so.
Before we get deeper into Coding Challenges, I'm really interested, like in general, how you came to that, which we've dived into a little bit. But you're an accomplished software engineer with extensive experience. I'm just curious, how did you start?
6, I think, when my dad bought a ZX Spectrum. I don't know if those were ever available in the US, but Clay Sinclair and the Spectrums were quite popular computers in the UK in the mid 1980s. My dad bought one of these because, I don't know, I guess he liked gadgets as much as the next engineer. He had to play with that, and I always wanted to be a pilot when I was that old, and there was a flight simulator on there. So I started playing with that, and then of course, wanting to start playing with it and figuring out how it works and how could I write my own code and do my own thing. So then when I came back to the UK to come to school, my school maths department had some BBC computers and a nice big thick bucket where you had to program them in BASIC. So by that time, I developed some interest in AI. So as a 9-year-old, I started trying to program AI in a BBC BASIC, which was just clearly not going to happen because they had like 16 kilobytes of RAM and I think like a 1 megahertz processor or something. So it's not capable of doing anything much more than fairly trivial programs, but just went from there. I started building games and eventually I got into a Commodore Amiga, started spending a lot of time writing games, and I've been coding ever since.
Wow.
That's getting on for about 40 years now.
Wow. That's amazing. And I think there's this odd idea, or maybe this stereotype that all like coders, like the young 25-year-old guy in a hood, writing alone somewhere in his basement. And that's not the reality. I've met tons of software engineers at senior leadership levels that are of all sorts of ages. I mean, I've worked with some individual contributors in their 60s, even 70s at one place. And in general, do you feel like there's still a lot more in your career to grow?
I think there's a lot of room to grow. I've certainly come across a few people that haven't grown in their careers and have stopped. And particularly early in my career, I found that quite often I meet a lot of people that maybe had 20 years experience, but actually it was just the same 1 year they'd done 20 times. So it hadn't grown. So on the flip side though, when I was 17, I did work experience with a company that I then joined after university. And I learned to program in C during that work experience week because they kind of like, what do we do with a 17-year-old? Said, what do you want to do for a week? And I said, I've heard about this programming language C. That seemed pretty cool. I'd love to learn it. So they introduced me to this guy and went, now, meet Eric. He's our best C programmer. And Eric, I think, was about mid-50s. And I sat next to him, had a chat, and I was like, oh, you must have been doing this for ages. How do you get into this? And he's like, nope. I retired from being a builder at 50 because I was getting too old for it and hurt my back. Started to learn programming at 50. And I guess, like I say, mid-50s when I met him, he was the best C programmer in the company. So I learned C from him.
Really cool.
So that was, I think, 94. So even back then, there was a wide range of people in tech and doing different things. So, I'm not that old. Quite far off that. Thankfully, despite the great debt. So, I plan to keep learning new languages, learning new things. There's so much new stuff there. There's a lot of interesting things and there's a lot of interesting problems to solve. And I'm just weird, but I actually find that solving the people problems is just as fun as technical ones now. And
so this is an interesting thing I see. You have this interesting career, a great career, like a long career. And then at some point you decided to create an online presence. What led to that? What made you think I need to start sharing what I've been learning on the web?
My career's actually been a bit, do we say, varied. So I started off as a very traditional software engineer in a very traditional engineering company in the UK. And I started full-time after university in 1998, just as the internet was kicking off and the dot-com boom was becoming all the hype. And there were loads of early 20s people doing startups like Google and Yahoo and so on. And I was looking at that and I was like, I'd like to do my own business. And I had planned to do that anyway for a variety of reasons, kind of by the time I was 40. But with all this dot-com hype and other stuff, I was there thinking, I need to do this. And for a variety of reasons, then in 2001, I decided to give it a go and started a business. So I've done a variety of things. It's been a bit all over the place. So a mixture of starting my own business, a mixture of working for people, a mixture of being a contractor and consultant. And for that time, I've built an online presence a few times. I've done a few things. I got blogging in 2007 and built a fairly popular blog. Again, I said I like lighting. That was not actually in tech. It was in a different area. So I've done all these different things. And one of the things that I learned in 2001, 2002 was that networking was a great way to build my business. And so for a variety of reasons from 2002 onwards, I got more and more involved in a lot of networking things. So I was actually one of the first users of LinkedIn, quite an early user of Facebook, quite an early user of a bunch of other networking things to kind of grow a network. So it's kind of then embarrassing if I scroll all the way forward to 2020 and I first heard of people going, oh, you can build an influence and like really kind of publish content on LinkedIn. And I'm like, no, not seeing anything. So it took me then till late 2022, I started posting on LinkedIn a little bit, and then I started taking it seriously for March 23. When I started coding challenges, like, well, I'm going to do this newsletter. How am I going to find an audience? I start creating on LinkedIn. So I only really started creating popular on LinkedIn in March 23. And at the time, I had 4,000 followers. And as you mentioned, in that, the last 9 months, that's grown to over 100,000.
That's amazing. I mean, I've been writing for a while on LinkedIn for at least a couple of years. I'm nowhere near that. And I felt like I was growing fast. And I see people like you. There's a couple other people I've seen growing at lightning speed. What are some takeaways that people might find useful if they're trying to grow on LinkedIn?
So I think the thing that's there's three things that really helped. The first has been just engaging with other people like yourself, and commenting on their posts. So, particularly very early on, I had quite a lot of time on my hands, and I was quite committed to making this work. So I put in a couple of hours a day into commenting on other people's posts, engaging, just being active on the platform, so we say. So I did that quite a lot. And then, as I say, in March, I started creating content, and I think, publishing once a day. And as I got into the flow of it, I decided to start doing that twice a day. And I've refined what I learned about it over time. I continually looked at what I've been publishing and what signal I get back from that. So, what's the engagement? What's the response? What are people interested in? What helps drive traffic to the coding challenges? And sometimes I've not really used that very well, because what works for driving traffic to coding challenges doesn't always align with what I'm interested in, because I have a lot more interest in just coding. I like the leadership side. I like the people stuff. I like the career development. I've got an interest in AI and machine learning. So I've ended up posting quite a broad set of topics. And I think that is quite a broad audience. So it's not kind of done it long from the marketing point of view. It's not niche down, really focused. So I think if I'd been more niche, I'd have a smaller, more focused audience for coding challenges. But the flip side is I didn't entirely plan to make coding challenges into a business. It was done as a bit of a share these ideas and see what happens. So that's also meant that I've had a lot of fun. The engagement and the audience I built, I've learned a lot from. So when I post something that maybe talks about, say, why I think no estimates doesn't work, it gets a lot of engagement and I get a chance to learn from that. And sometimes that engagement gets a little bit excited, shall we say, but a lot of times I get people there commenting, and I either better learn how to express my ideas, or I learn from them of why my ideas are wrong. So I quite enjoy having that diversity, but I think I've always made a point of responding to those comments because I view it as my chance to learn. And I think, unlike a lot of people that have built a bit of audience, that constant engagement means that I'm not just publishing content, I'm engaging in the discussion. And I think that keeps a lot of people coming back and has caused it to grow quicker.
That is a really interesting takeaway. I think that's a big piece. People do the post and ghost type of pattern. And I do see you're also a prolific commenter. You've responded to me for sure on there. I've written comments, and I notice you always keep a cool head. You are very humble in general, and you always really seem to be genuine with your posts, which I think people can read. We can tell when people are disingenuous, and you can generally feel like this person was writing something that's helpful and they wrote it from a good place.
Yeah, I've slipped on the cool head once or twice.
I mean, it's bound to happen. And I think on X, I also see you on X, Twitter, and that's a little bit more of a spicy platform. I feel like on LinkedIn, you have your face associated with your job, and you might not say the same things you would say with the cloak of anonymity that you could on X, right?
Well, my name and face is on X as well, so it's fairly same approach there. But LinkedIn, there's a few times where it's a little bit frustrating when people respond very quickly to your post and tell you you're a complete idiot. And it's like, okay, but you haven't read it. You've read one or two words from the first sentence and then ignored all the rest of the point. So that
I've seen that too.
Occasionally gets a little bit frustrating. I end up pointing people back to, please read the post. But other than that, we're all strangers on the internet. So I'm a great believer in, I think as Eleanor Roosevelt said, that nobody can make you feel bad except yourself. So if somebody doesn't like my stuff and they're a random stranger on the internet, who cares? I'm not going to get upset by it. Where if somebody comes back and says, John, you're wrong, or you're an idiot because this, and lays out a good argument, cool. Then, there might be some random stranger, but if there's something I can go and look at and go, actually, they got a point. I've learned from that. So it's a win. So I don't mind being wrong. I don't mind admitting it.
Point of view. I think that we talk about learning in public a lot, especially for more junior developers, like learn in public. And I guess the intention is like, hey, it's not just learning in public to share what you've learned, but it's also like you can learn by being wrong in public as well, or defending your ideas or getting exposed to new ideas too.
So yeah, I'm a great believer in learning in public as well. And again, the coding challenges of that. Some of these things that I'm now doing out, the challenges I haven't looked at for 30 years, or I'm refreshing my ideas on them. So again, going through it, lighting it, getting feedback on it from people is really useful.
If you were learning to code nowadays, what would you be learning and why?
So I think because of where I am, I have a different answer than if I was genuinely didn't have this knowledge. So I think because of where I am, I would be learning the fundamentals of data structure algorithms. I'd be learning the fundamentals of computer architecture, and I'd be learning the fundamentals of operating systems and networks. Because once you understand a lot of those things, then everything else is easy to build and lay on top. I would probably these days, again, I'm slightly biased, I would probably start with Python as my first programming language and learn how to write good software in Python. I think it's a very easy language for people that are new to programming to learn, not least because I'm watching my kids learn it. My kids are learning programming Python at the moment, so but it's very easy for you to pick up because it's fairly forgiving. You can get started quite quickly. There's an incredibly powerful standard library that lets you do a lot of things very, very quickly and easily. I mean, I started off writing computer games when I was early teens, and back then you had to think about, oh, how do I get a screen buffer? How do I address that? What's the memory address of this thing to get it to blit a bitmap onto the screen? How do I actually create a double buffer? How do I double buffer things? And my screen is this big. I've got to make the buffer wide enough that I can render the sprite off screen before it comes on screen. Otherwise, it'll and I've got to be sure I've double buffer or triple buffered with hardware. And it's incredibly complex and a lot of detail where they've built equivalent computer games in Python using Pygame, and they just get like the logic. All that whole stuff about graphics and double buffering and sprites and kind of taken care of, and it's all there and they can use it straight away. And you can see the same with machine learning. If you wanted to do some machine learning or data science, pick up Python. You can build some incredibly complex models in 20, 30 lines of Python and get straight into doing the useful, valuable work. So for that reason, I start with Python. So you can start seeing something useful coming out very, very quickly. After that, I think probably move towards taking up TypeScript and doing something on the web and learning to build a front end with React or Vue or something. I'd probably try TypeScript to introduce a bit more of that static typing and start to really understand the importance of types and the benefit that it can give you in that error checking in your code. And then after that, I'd be wanting to go to a low level language. So depending which way you learn and what access you've got to for support, probably looking at something like C or C++ or Rust. And that would be the approach I take. Personally, I really like Rust. I spent a lot of time as a C++ programmer. I love C++, did a lot of it in the past. I probably lean these days more towards Rust because I really like Cargo. I like the ecosystem. I like Rust as a language. It has a lot of powerful features.
If you could think of a few books that you'd recommend for listeners that are on their coding journey or maybe in their career, do you have any on the top of your head that you'd recommend?
I've long been a big fan of Extreme Programming Explained by Kent Beck. That in Extreme Programming transformed the way I thought about software development. And increasingly, I see a lot of people saying, well, why do we need this? Why do we need that? And with kind of knowing what it was like in the late 90s building software when everything was waterfall and we didn't have unit testing, people didn't do TDD, and seeing what things were like back then, understanding why those things are so important and what the context of them was, I think is really useful. Because now there's too much urban mythology about what TDD is, for example, and what agile is. And so going back to the first principles, understanding what they were there to solve and why they came about helps you understand when they're appropriate and when they're not. So that's really good. Again, Kent Beck's book on TDD, I'd recommend. Martin Fowler's book on refactoring, again, was transformative when I read it. Really helped the way I thought about structuring code and laying that out. The Pragmatic Programmer, again, incredibly good book. Really like that.
Very good.
I can't remember if it's Practice of Programming. Yeah, The Practice of Programming by think it's Brian Koenigsegg and somebody else. Again, another really good book that really looks at how you think about structuring new code and how you write good code. And it's very pragmatic because this is from people that built the Unix operating system and built a lot of what modern technology is all built off. They really understood writing good code, and they didn't have a lot of the modern tools that we do. The other thing I think is a great book is The Art of Unix Programming. There's a lot of good wisdom in there about how to write good code, how to structure it well. And again, it looked at the philosophy behind a lot of how Unix was put together, which has flown through into Linux, and I think flows through into good software development. So those are all the books that I really like. I think incredibly useful.
Definitely familiar with a few of those, and I got recommended those by the person I looked up to as a programmer. One of the startups I worked with, Martin Fowler's refactoring book. I remember he suggested I read that one. I was like, wow, that was really good. It opened me up to a whole. I like when books I read them and they kind of inform the way I either think about writing code or actually my practical day to day, like writing code. Kyle Simpson has done a lot of that for me. I think a lot of other JavaScript developers out there.
The problem I find with refactoring now, though, is it's another of those terms that's been bent away from what it really means. So a lot of people now use refactoring when they mean rewriting. They talk about, spending 3 weeks refactoring something, and that's not refactoring, that's a rewrite. And it's a very different approach, a very different mindset. Sorry, I think we're going to ask about AI.
You're right. Yeah. Because I'm curious. There's fear, there's opportunity, there's a lot of fear mongering, I feel like, going on the internet about AI and specifically how it will impact coding. What are your thoughts about AI currently and how it's going to impact software engineers in the near future?
So ever since I first started learning about computers and how to program it in the 1980s, there have been, every 10 years, AI is going to come and put programmers out of business. I need programmers in the next 5 years. And yet, here we are. There's more programmers than ever. There's more people writing software than ever. So, yes, the large language models are infinitely more advanced than anything that's come through before and much more powerful. And they are definitely the most impressive thing I've seen in all the things over the years that promised to put programmers out of work. But fundamentally, they're just generating the next token on a statistical basis of what the previous token was. There's no intelligence, there's no understanding there. So they're incredibly powerful. And if you're doing something that's been done before, I'm stunned at how good you can get a result from. So, if you want to go to something like ChatGPT and say, write me a function to calculate primes. Yeah, great. It'll train out some code a lot quicker than you're probably even Googling it. If you want to give it some code and say, translate it to another language, it's pretty good. But that's only a tiny, tiny, tiny part of software engineering. Most of the software engineering, we get back to the hard bit is, the squishy meat sacks, as one of the authors that I follow in sci-fi puts it. It says, the hard bit has never been saying to a computer, add 2 to 2 and tell me what the answer is. The hard bit has been going back to another human going, right, what do you want your software to do? And saying, okay, well, great. You said it, you want it to calculate stuff. What do you mean by that? What operations? Do you want to support addition, subtraction, multiplication? Do you want to calculate squares? Do you want to you want to calculate squares? Well, we can't do that perfectly in a computer with floating point numbers because you can't represent floating point numbers perfectly. So what do we do in these other cases? And then they go, I don't know. So,
yeah. And
that's just a calculator. We can make that incredibly hard just to get the precise requirements for that. Scale that up to building something as complex as a lot of modern applications. Yeah, the coding is the easy bit. The hard bit is us establishing what we want the business to do, what it should do in these cases. And that's always been the case. That, it's translating what another human wants you to do to the code. And writing the code is a little bit. So even if somehow the ChatGPT gets 50 times better in the next year or two, still somebody's going to have to tell it what we want it to do. Somebody's going to have to talk to another human, figure out what the requirements are, and then structure those requirements in a way that tells ChatGPT how to generate the right code for it. So we'll just be programming, but in English, maybe, or closer to English,
Yeah.
but then maybe in C or Rust. And then the other side for that is they are statistical models that are basically churning out stuff. They're taking all the data that's been fed in and reproducing it based on statistically what the occurrence is. So again, like I say, that calculate squares or something, that function or something that's well defined, that's well seen, that's on Stack Overflow a million times, will be in the training data. As soon as you step outside the training data, again, it can't reason, it doesn't think, it doesn't have intelligence. It's not going to do something which isn't in the training data. So, I don't know, go back 30 years ago, nobody had heard of MP3s. We didn't have that file format, or Orbis, or pick one of those, or MP4 for video. Whatever the next format is that somebody comes up with something like that, you won't be able to go to ChatGPT and say, right, because it won't understand it. There won't be that data in the training set.
Mm-hmm.
So that data is only going to exist by somebody writing the code that ends up in a training set. So again, if we really want it to go forward and keep being relevant, we've got to have an army programmer somewhere creating training data for it. So again, there'll be a need for software engineers to create that training data. Even if you don't sit there and code for a company doing this, you'll be coding for OpenAI or somebody else, building some training data for them to feed into it. So yeah, I don't see software engineering going away for a long time yet.
Yeah, and that's funny because like I'm trying to use it as much as possible for work, and I encourage all the developers on my team to use it. But we're doing things with either pretty niche libraries that we just don't have. There's just not enough data to train them on for that.
Yeah.
That you can't just ask it generic questions about it. We're doing really, really specific things that we just don't get good answers to. Also, because you're right, because it's been trained on the corpus of the internet, you get fairly average answers in code to stuff, and you still need to know how to debug it. That's another issue. People saying, I'm going to copy paste some code and it breaks apart. You're still going to need to know, well, how do you fix that now? Did you trust everything that it spit out to you? Is it wildly accurate? Maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it's incredibly useful for some cases, and I can see if we all learn to use it well and learn what its limitations, benefits are, I can see it being a great tool for us to have. And I think that there's the comment from a lot of people is your job's not going to be replaced by AI. It's going to be replaced by a writer or a software engineer or somebody who is leveraging AI to increase their productivity. So I think if we look at using it as a right tool and leveraging it and learning how we can get benefit and where the limitations are, where the strengths are, it'll make some of us more productive. But there's such a demand for software engineers, ignoring the current kind of recession or economic climate. There's such a demand for software engineers. There's demand for more software that I think over the years, even if we get more productive, there'll still be a growing demand for software engineers for many years yet.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think you've probably seen and lived through some boom and bust cycles to verify and validate that.
Yeah, I was just a post somebody put up the other day of, it's a shame that Job for Life didn't exist in software anymore, and I couldn't resist responding that actually that's not true. It's, person who wrote this, yeah, sure, they work for a big tech company, but they're relatively young. For those of us that are a little bit older and got a little bit more grey hair, remember the financial crisis of 2008, 2011, and the rough time then, and how many people got laid off then. Remember the telco crisis in 2001, the dot-com crash in 2000, the recessions in the early 1990s. These cycles go around and around again. And in each of those, I know tech people who were laid off. And in the subsequent booms afterwards, I know tech people who've done well. So,
yeah. And I hate to see that narrative getting spread so far out because I feel it's bad. I'm on Reddit or other spaces and I see people scaring people away from something. I'm like, if you want to learn how to code, you should learn how to code. If you really like it and want to do it, I think you should, which leads me to my last couple questions. What do you think is the best way for people to learn how to code?
I haven't mentioned a bit that I do think is important. So I think the best way really is do enough of reading a book or a tutorial or whatever your preferred way. So, watch a video to learn to learn the basics of, say, Python or Rust, or read a book if that's your preferred thing. For me, it's a book. For other people, it might be video. Do just enough of watching that or reading that to be able to install the tool chain and build Hello World. Then start trying to build something real, build something you're interested in. So if you haven't got any ideas, look at coding challenges, pick an idea. If you have got some ideas, build something that you're interested in. So for me, it was computer games as a kid. Work until you get stuck, then watch a bit more tutorial, read a bit more of the book, and iterate through that. So that's the best way, I think, to learn. So that's why coding challenges exist, because I think you learn best by actually doing it and building something. And that helps, and for me at least, is much more motivating if it's something real, something that isn't just write another function to calculate squares, or write another function to traverse a linked list. Yeah, I mean, great. Write that as a data structure thing, but don't like that to learn how to code, because it's kind of boring. Build something that excites you, that interests you. So for me, that was like Alien Breed and Sensible Soccer and Lemmings and clones of those games as a kid. Later, it was trying to build AI and so on. Nowadays, it's like, let's clone Redis, or let's build a load balancer, or things like that. So, read just enough of a book or watch just enough of a tutorial to get you started, better compile your first book, then start building. When you get stuck, read the next bit of the book. Ask ChatGPT for explain the next concept to you, or go and watch the next bit of the video tutorial. Just enough to get you unstuck, and then start building again.
I like that a lot. That's kind of the method I've been using over the years. Like, I don't think I've ever completed a Udemy course ever. I've definitely bought quite a lot, and they've been really useful, but they help me to just get just that base knowledge in order to build something, and then go off on my own and get stuck, and then go right back to there. Yeah. And I can't recommend coding challenges enough. I think that's such a cool, service that you have. The material you have there, really, really helpful, really useful, really challenging. And it's cool because you also have a community of people that are there as well that you can kind of, lean on. There's enough people that have done it now that you can see many different iterations and ways that people have approached these challenges, which is also really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got somewhere in the region of 2,500 people on the Discord server now that are discussing things and sharing ideas.
It's amazing.
There's, guess 200 or 300 solutions in the GitHub repo now that people have done in different languages and different challenges. And it's growing regularly. I think there's about 75 just for the WC challenge alone.
That's amazing. Very cool.
Growing daily.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, definitely check it out. Any last words for the audience?
I think you're hitting it in a way before. If you want to code, have fun. For those of us that are intrigued by making things and building things, writing code and being a software engineer is a great way to be creative and express yourself. Particularly if, like me, you suck at art. and despite, you can't see them unless, but despite the guitars behind me, I suck at music too. So it's my creative outlet. At least the creative outlet I'm good at. So do what you enjoy. And make the most of it. Have fun. And don't let anyone stop you. It's something that everybody can do. We all have the capability of doing it. Can be frustrating at times, but just do that iterating. Find that little way to unblock yourself. Keep building.
Love it. Where can people find you on the internet?
On LinkedIn, it's John Crickett. On Twitter, it's John Crickett. Or search for coding challenges. Google, find that easily.
Nice. And also, all the links will be posted in the show notes of this episode. And if you're on the newsletter, it'll be in there as well. Thank you so much for joining, and really appreciate you being on here and sharing some of your knowledge and talking to us today.
Cool. Thanks, Brian. It's been a pleasure.
That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. To learn more about becoming a software engineer with us, then check out Parsity.io. If you're not quite ready for that, then jump into our Dev30.xyz program, which is 30 days of working on your mindset, habits, and JavaScript skills. Totally worth it. See you next week.